Hey guys, it's Ellen Brock, novel editor. Today I'm going to talk about how to write a character arc in a series. This was one of my most requested videos because creating a character arc in a series of books can be a little bit tricky. You don't want your character to change so much between books that they're not recognizable. There are circumstances where you might want to do this, but for the majority of series, you want your characters to be basically the same throughout because that helps the reader to stay connected and invested. But you do still want to have, in most situations, some character growth and some character arcs in every book. This can be a little tricky because when we think about character arcs, a lot of the time we think about really big changes, really prominent changes, like Ebenezer Scrooge going from miserly to generous. And it doesn't really work to have such dramatic changes in every book because you can't have all of these huge changes in your characters every time. Another challenge is that you can't just introduce new flaws or new emotional problems for your characters out of the blue in later books. Those problems need to be established in previous books, or they need to be present in the series as a whole, and this can make it a lot more complicated because you can't just treat every novel completely as if it's a standalone. So there are two common approaches to executing a character arc in a series, and I'm going to go over them today. They are very similar to each other. There's not a dramatic difference in how you execute it in terms of each individual book. The differences mainly come from where the character arc is coming from and what the character overcomes specifically in each individual book. So the two basic ways to execute the character arc in a series is to either have one arc that stretches across the entire series, or to have a series of individual arcs in every book that aren't really connected to each other in a substantial way. And both options are very effective, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. I think a lot of writers think that having an overarching character arc that spans the entire series is a better option, but it isn't necessarily better. It just depends on your goals and what's important to you. So option number one is to create an overarching character arc, so an arc that lasts the entire series. This option can be a little bit more difficult because you need to plan in advance. You need to understand where you want your character to end up, and you also need to have at least a rough idea of how many books you're going to have, because you don't want to finish the character arc too early and then wish that you had an ability to carry it out for longer, to make the series longer. So with the first option, you want to understand your character's starting point and your character's end point, and then you want to create stepping stones in between. So instead of in the first book taking the character all the way from their beginning point to their end point so they do their full arc, you just want them to do a little bit of a hop, a little bit of an upgrade in every book so they get a little bit closer to the finish line. You can kind of conceptualize this as literal stepping stones over a lake. The lake is the whole character arc in the whole series, but all of the stones are over the same lake. Depending on the complexity of your series, you may have detours where your character actually goes backwards. Depending on circumstances, they may have a negative character arc, meaning that they become worse or more flawed instead of less flawed. So it's always possible that in the process of crossing this lake of a character arc, your character will spend a book or two going backwards and then jump back forwards again. So the second approach to creating a character arc in a series is to treat every book as a standalone. This is very easy for people who don't like plotting in advance, or if you don't know how long your series is going to run. So with this option, the easiest way is generally to build the character arc based on either what happened in the previous book or what happens in this book as a repercussion of what happened in the previous book. So for example, if your character saved the world at the end of the previous book, maybe in the sequel they become really popular and they're struggling to cope with that. So maybe they stop hanging out with their old friends, or they become really obsessed with their popularity, or maybe they become really shy and scared of their popularity, and then they need to grow to accept being in the spotlight or being more prominent. So that type of building off of what happened in the previous book can give you a springboard for new character arcs without really having to plan in advance or to know very much about where the series is going. So with either approach to the character arc, it can be really helpful to make arcs that focus on the character's changing beliefs rather than flaws. When you change the character's flaws in a series, that's when you can have a little bit too dramatic of change between books. And of course, sometimes if you want that effect, that could be perfectly fine. But in most series, we don't want that big dramatic change. We want the characters to stay basically the same. So instead of changing a big part of their personality or a quirk or a flaw or something that really impacts who they are and how they act, we can instead change their belief about themselves, about the world, about the antagonist. There can be some belief that they have that you can have progress and change over the course of the book. A good example of this is in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Harry wonders if he belongs in Gryffindor, and this is completely based on a belief. This is not a personality flaw. This isn't something that impacts how he presents himself, how he talks, his friends. It doesn't impact his relationships or any major situations in his life, but it does impact him emotionally. He wonders if he should have been in Slytherin, and his character arc in that book is his realization that he does indeed belong in Gryffindor. So using a belief instead of a flaw allows you to have a lot of character arcs without really changing all that much about your character. You really won't see a lot of personality changes. It's just about giving the individual books a little bit more emotional depth and a little more emotional complexity that can make them more satisfying to read. So where do these beliefs come from? I'm going to go over a few different places where your character might develop new beliefs, or old beliefs might suddenly come to the surface, or you might plan to plant all of these in advance if you're the kind of person who likes to plot out every element of your series. So the first place you might look to find beliefs for character arcs in a series is with your character aging. As your character gets older, whether they're hitting puberty or entering high school or graduating college or becoming a parent or a grandparent, there will be all kinds of new obstacles that come along with aging and new beliefs about themselves, their children, their partner that can really help to create interesting character arcs. Number 2 is a change in location. Your character may have been a hero in their small town and they may be nobody in a big city. Or maybe in a big city they felt like they could disappear and be invisible, and they move to a small town and suddenly everybody is staring at them. This can be a really interesting way to have new beliefs emerge that your character never had to face in the first story. Number 3 is trauma. If you're writing a whole series about your character, they're probably going to go through some pretty dramatic experiences. So maybe this character is coping with some not so nice feelings as a result of things that happened in previous books. This could be guilt over someone they couldn't save, or maybe a new phobia that's developed as a response to something that's happened. It could even be a physical trauma that's affecting how they're able to function or changes the way that they view themselves. There are lots of ways you can leverage the traumatic experiences of previous books to create character arcs in the new books. Number 4 is different challenges. If your books have a lot of different creatures or antagonists or circumstances or different mysteries that need to be solved, your character is going to have to face things that he or she did not have to face in other situations. So new challenges can cause beliefs to emerge, can bring up some uncomfortable feelings, or even just feelings of inadequacy, of not being as good at the new challenges as the protagonist felt they were dealing with the old challenges in the first book. Or maybe your character has a full sense of bravado and now is overly arrogant and thinks they can handle new challenges with ease, and they have to come to the realization that they're not that good at everything. Number 5 is changes in society or the government. This is more relevant if you're writing sci-fi or fantasy, but how does your character feel about the way society has changed? Maybe as a result of things they did in the previous book, or maybe just as a result of time moving forward. How do they feel about enslaving trolls or having child soldiers? What do these situations bring up for them emotionally? These situations can cause a lot of negative feelings to emerge, or maybe conflicting feelings, or maybe your character is unable to oppose the government or society in the way that they would like. There are lots of ways you can develop character arcs based on changes in government and society. So the last place I'm going to leave you with is the antagonist changing tactics. If the antagonist tactics change, this is going to force the character to adapt. Maybe they feel inadequate, or maybe they're more afraid of this way that the antagonist is acting. Maybe the antagonist has moved from kidnapping to torture and the protagonist is struggling with how to cope with that, or has to face things that they never had to face before. So I hope this video gave you an idea of the two different ways that you can approach the character arc, as well as some different places where you can draw beliefs for your characters. My top recommendation is to focus on character arcs that are built around beliefs rather than flaws, because in a series this is going to be a lot easier to execute over and over again without having to dramatically change who your character is in every story. This video is part of my novel bootcamp series. I will be making videos 3 to 4 days per week throughout August. I'll also be hosting workshops on my blog, so if you want to come check that out, I'll put a link in the description. Happy writing, guys!